Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bold Take Scouting Podcast. Today, we've got a Q&A session, and we've got a bunch of questions that you guys have sent us through our Instagram, and we're just going to be getting right into them. So our first question is, Alex, do you think that with Michael Penix Jr. healthy, can Indiana contend for a Big Ten title?
The short answer is no. I just think that Ohio State is too talented of a team. I really think they have the Big Ten on lock right now. I know there's a few other solid teams in the Big Ten, including Indiana. I just think because Ohio State is such a big brand in general that they're going to absorb most of the top talent going into the Big Ten. And like I said, they kind of have it on lock. So unfortunately for any Indiana fans, I don't think they'll have a shot. I mean, obviously they'll have a shot to win, but I don't think they will.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the only advantage Indiana has over Ohio State is that they have an incumbent quarterback, while Ohio State is bringing in a new quarterback to replace Justin Fields, that being C.J. Stroud. But I just think when you look at the talent and the coaching staff that's going to be surrounding him at wide receiver, you have Olave, you have Wilson, and then you've got a really good offensive line, good running backs. I don't see how Indiana can really compete with that, given the talent advantage that Ohio State's going to once again have from top to bottom.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think the incumbent quarterback is huge. I think C.J. Stroud is probably the favorite to start at Ohio State, but obviously with Penix coming back to Indiana, that's a huge advantage. But I think C.J. Stroud is talented enough to be able to pick it up pretty much from the beginning. And we'll move on now to our second question. It's a fairly simple question: is Texas A&M getting a little overhyped this year? And Costa, I'll let you start with that.
I'm going to say no. They're returning the majority of their team, which is really rare in college football. I know they lost Kellen Mond, but all we're hearing is good things out of the Texas A&M camp regarding the quarterback competition between King and Calvada. And I really think that whoever emerges there is going to be surrounded by a really good supporting cast with a good offensive line, a really good tight end in Jalen Weidermeyer, good receivers. I know Anaya Smith is a really versatile, dangerous weapon, really good running backs headlined by CJ Spiller. And I just think that it's going to be a good transition from Mon to the new quarterback. And top to bottom, they're returning a lot of guys, and it should be another really good season for Texas A&M when they're really a fringe playoff team again.
Yeah, and you mentioned them bringing back a lot of guys from last year. They're bringing in a lot of top talent from last year. I think there's a few guys kind of towards the top of the draft board. There's DeMarvin Leal, the defensive tackle, and then there's Jalen Weidermeyer, the tight end, who we both really, really like. You've mentioned that you think he might have a Kyle Pitts type impact.
Yeah.
So I think that would be huge. And then we have Kenyon Green along the offensive line, and then you mentioned Isaiah Spiller, the running back. So those are definitely two guys that are probably around the top 32 to go into the 2022 NFL draft. So I mean, that's huge to have four guys that are that talented. So I think they're definitely not overhyped.
Yeah, and our next question is, who are your top 5 leading candidates for the first overall pick next year? You know what? If you're asking me to name 5 guys, I'm actually going to put 4 quarterbacks. I think this is just a really strong quarterback class, and I think that whoever comes out on top is going to certainly be worthy of the first overall pick, and I also think it's highly likely that the team holding the first overall pick is in dire need of a quarterback, maybe the Houston Texans or really anyone that ends up with that first pick. And so I'm going to say that Kayvon Thibodeau, if somehow no quarterback emerges, or the team that has the first pick doesn't need a quarterback and doesn't want to trade it to a quarterback needy team for a bounty, Thibodeau is a really talented pass rusher from Oregon. Otherwise, I'm going to go Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell, and the next two on a degree less, but Carson Strong and Keaton Slovis. Maybe one of them has a fantastic year and breaks into that QB1 spot and nabs the title of the first overall pick.
Yeah, so if I'm being honest, I couldn't come up with 5.
Yeah.
I came up with 4 guys, and the guys I came up with, obviously, Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell. I think those are the 2 leading contenders. And I came up with Thibodeau as well. And then I'll throw out another name out there. Obviously, we're pretty sure there's going to be a quarterback going. I think now, as it's become a quarterback-driven league, pretty much the team with the first overall pick pretty much needs a quarterback. If you have a good enough quarterback, you're not getting the first overall pick unless there's like a freak injury or something. So, maybe if that's the case, Thibodeau might be the guy to go first overall. The last name I'll leave you guys with, Evan Neal, the tackle from Alabama. And it kind of reminded me of the 2013 draft a little bit, how tackles went 1-2, Eric Fisher and Luke Jokel. So it's like tackles are a premier position, along with obviously quarterback, edge rusher. Those are the three true premier positions in the NFL draft. Usually those are the positions where guys get overdrafted. And I'm not saying Evan Neal wouldn't, in theory, be worthy of a number 1 overall pick because he is very good. But since tackle is such a premier position, maybe if I don't want to toss out any names and somebody gets injured, but if a team with a good quarterback happens to get the first overall pick because that said quarterback gets injured, Thibodeau or Neal might be the two guys that you could look at to be in contention for that first overall pick.
Our next question is, could Derek King, the Miami quarterback, become a potential first-round pick? I'm going to say no. I know King is a good college quarterback. He's really fun to watch because he's a really dynamic athlete and basically a running back once he tucks it and runs it. But, I mean, he's listed at 5'11", which means he might come in at even shorter than that at the NFL Combine, and that's a killer for a quarterback's draft stock to fall under 6 feet tall. I know that Kyler Murray happened. He went first overall at 5'11", but I think he was a better passer and even more athletic. I don't see King taking that huge first step that he would need as a passer to go in the first round. I think currently his internal clock is a little too slow. His arm strength is questionable, and that really can't improve. So I think King can be a middle round guy, and he can make for a solid backup in the NFL. I don't see him going in the first round.
Yeah, I have one word written down for my notes in this question, and it's no. I mean, just to be frank about it, I think you mentioned the arm talent is not where it needs to be. It's really subpar, and like you said, that's not really something that's really going to be fixed. It's just your arm talent is what it is. And you notice watching his tape that he has to put his whole body into throws that he should not have to do. Throwing the ball 40 yards down the field, you see him turn his full body, his full shoulders, his full hips, everything to get that ball down the field. Even to try to zip in a 10-yard crossing route, you just see him it takes way too much effort. I don't see him make a lot of tight window throws either. It's just kind of when the guy's open, the guy's there, he can hit it. And he kind of lacks some anticipation. I think a lot of the times his receivers have to either stop and catch the ball, or he's not leading them open. He's kind of just throwing the ball where they are. And sometimes you see his receivers taking unnecessary hits because of his ball placement. So I think I agree. His athleticism is decent. I'll be honest. From what I've heard about Derek King in the past, I was expecting a little bit more from his athleticism. I didn't think it was I thought it was on like the top of a quarterback athleticism, and in my opinion, it really wasn't. So I think a solid backup, maybe in a system where the quarterback is more athletic, maybe a backup for like the Ravens. I think that'd be an interesting spot for him because he would run a similar offense. But short answer, no, I don't think he has a shot to be a first-round pick.
Yeah, and on that note, we're going to move on to our next question, which is, how many quarterbacks do you see going in the first round in 2022? I'll let you lead that one off.
So I came up with 5. So those 5, obviously, again, Sam Howell, Spencer Rattler, and then Carson Strong and Keaton Slovis. And then my 5th guy was Malik Willis. He's a guy that I'm actually really intrigued by. I think he's got a lot of potential. I ranked him 5th in my quarterback rankings when we posted our top 10. You were a little bit lower on him. But I really am intrigued by his athletic ability. In my opinion, it's quite a bit better than Derek King. And I think he's got a more natural arm talent. He definitely has some arm strength. I'm hesitant to say this because I don't want to compare him to this guy, but it kind of reminded me of watching Michael Vick when I was younger and when Vick was on the Eagles. It's a similar kind of skill set. I'm not saying he's going to be Michael Vick, but it's a similar skill set where he's super athletic and a strong arm, just maybe some mechanical things, accuracy things, and stuff like that he has to fix up.
Yeah, we'll actually be having a quarterback ranking breakdown as a podcast episode in the next couple of days. So we'll go into further detail on these guys. I also have the same five guys as you. I think five is going to be the magic number in this draft class. It's a really strong draft class, but I mean, it would be really shocking to see more than five. Five is already a big number for number of first round quarterbacks. And when you're breaking down which guys, I expect Rattler, Howell, Slovis, and Strong to be first round picks. I think they're totally on that track right now. And then of the other guys, I think that a fifth one will emerge right now. I would put Willis because I think that the two guys that I have ahead of him in my quarterback rankings are Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina and Tyler Shuck from Texas Tech. But I think both those guys could be finding themselves in the 2023 NFL draft rather than 2022. I think when you look at that landscape, it might come out to be a little less strong, and they might be wary of, as I said, the four names ahead of them. They might be thinking, all right, let's go to school, take another step forward and enter the draft next year. So I'm going to go with Willis as the fifth one and land at that magic number of five. And our next question is, who's the first player you see being drafted at each position? And we broke this down to each other before getting on this live, and we actually have the same players at every position. It's pretty similar, and for the couple of ones that there's just some debate on, we ended up having the same one either way. So let's just bounce back and forth for each position. At quarterback, we have Spencer Rattler, and we're gonna leave our description of Rattler for the quarterback episode because we could be talking all day about him. So who do you think is going to be the first running back taken?
So I'm going with Breece Hall. I don't think, the two top running backs, Isaiah Spiller and Breece Hall, in my opinion, they're not really anything special. I didn't really have the reaction watching those two that I did watching like Najee Harris or even Travis Etienne last year. I really liked both of those guys, to be honest. So I don't think they're at that caliber of a player yet. They still have another season to impress us. I'm going to go with Breece Hall. I thought he was a little bit more special than Isaiah Spiller.
And I'm going to say about the running back position, watch out for Brian Robinson Jr., the Alabama running back. And just from watching Alabama, when he ends up getting playing time at the end of games, he was always really impressive, really well-rounded running back. And now he's the lead back with Najee Harris gone in an Alabama offense, so he could end up being the first running back taken. Wide receiver, this one is really up for grabs, and you'll see a lot of different answers everywhere. We actually both have Treylon Burks. There's just a lot of guys in this draft class, like Olave, like Garrett Wilson, like John Mechie, that are more slot receiver NFL projections where they're really quick, great route running, really reliable hands, but they can't go and dominate at the catch point. They don't break tackles after the catch. And Treylon Burks really does that too. And he can operate inside, outside, run people over, have shifty routes. So he's a guy that we're both really high on.
Yeah, and I think we both have Burks currently as a wide receiver one in quotation marks. Could change obviously. But I think even if he was our wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, you could still make the argument for Burks going ahead of those other three guys that you mentioned, because all three of those guys are very similar. So a team might say, we can get a guy like that later, a little bit later on the draft. If we want a guy like Burks, who's a big catchability guy, run after the catch guy, contested catch guy, we have to take him now versus we want Wilson, but, John Mechie's very similar. Maybe we'll wait and take one of those guys. So we do both have him as wide receiver 1, but, even if he's not the wide receiver 1 on the draft board for most analysts, that could be a reason why you see him go ahead of the other guys.
Yeah, I agree. At tight end, we both have Jalen Weidermeyer. This one's a no-brainer. This guy is really special. We talked about him earlier. Alex said that I think he could have a Kyle Pitts rise, and that's a sneak peek to a bold take that'll be coming to our Instagram account in the coming weeks. Who do we have at offensive tackle, Alex, for most likely to go first at that position?
Evan Neal, the big man from Alabama. He's really impressive. He moves extremely well. I think, scouting Mekhi Becton, neither of us were super high on Becton, but Becton moved really well for a man of his size. Evan Neal is better than that, movement and athleticism-wise. It's just really impressive and really jaw-dropping to watch. Even if you're not a fan of scouting offensive linemen, it's worth turning on the tape, watching Evan Neal, because he's a dancing bear.
And if you're not a fan of watching offensive linemen, I think you should be.
It
It's
should
not
be.
flashy, but I really admire it. Guys who can kick out, get depth on their pass sets, latch on, sustain when they're also that big. It's just really impressive physically, athletically, and technically. So I recommend it if you're more of a casual fan. And at offensive guard, we have another Aggie, Kenyon Green. I really like him. I think he's maybe the safest pick in the draft, alongside some of the upper guys like Derek Stingley at corner is a really safe pick. But he's really a surefire quality starter in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to say more about Green. Just maybe we can point out that we were talking about Texas A&M earlier. I mean, look at that. We have Kenyon Green from Texas A&M, Jalen Weidermeyer from Texas A&M, and then one of the top 2 running backs, Isaiah Spiller, also from Texas A&M, which leads us to the defensive side of the ball. In our first position to talk about there is defensive tackle, and our top defensive tackle prospect is DeMarvin Leal, also from Texas A&M.
Yeah, I'm not as high on Leal as you are, and as the public is. I just don't think he really has one set position where he plays at a very high level. But the versatility is definitely appreciated in the NFL nowadays, and it seems to be another thin defensive tackle class. At edge rusher, we've talked about him, so I don't think there's too much to say. Kayvon Thibodeau, he's just a really slippery guy who can bend around the edge, but who can also power through his blocker and just has a variety of ways to win. He's already being pegged by a lot as the best player in this draft class, so I think he's the no-brainer edge one.
Yeah, and I would just like to throw in a name. He's not near Thibodeau in talent-wise, but George Karlaftis is a guy that I like from Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's again versatile along that defensive line. He's extremely strong, powerful. He kind of lacks a little bit of stuff technique-wise. He slips off a tackle or two here and there. Like I said, he's not Thibodeau, but we've talked about him. I just like to throw another edge rushing name into the mix.
I'll throw one out too. Cincinnati's Majai Sanders. I don't know if I pronounced his first name right, but he's got what a lot of the defensive ends in this draft do not have. He's very slippery, very great bend and burst around the edge, so he can really get under the blocker's shoulder, whereas some of these other guys have to rely on pass rushing moves and on technique and power. So I think he could end up maybe going ahead of Karlaftis or of Drake Jackson or someone like that. So I'm definitely excited to see how the defensive end class plays out. But I think it's safe to say that Kayvon Thibodeau is going to be the first one taken, which is, when you're saying that a year out, it really shows just how good he is.
People were saying that 2 years out. I mean,
that's true. Yeah,
was on the field as a true freshman. He's a massive dude. He's chiseled. It's very impressive to watch. So now we'll move on to our linebacker position. And this is another guy that's impressive to watch, Christian Harris from Alabama.
Absolutely. I think he's the next star linebacker coming out of Alabama. He's got great size, great speed, great length, so he can really get up and rush the passer, but also have the range to cover sideline to sideline against the run. Good tackler too, and he has all the athletic skills to be able to be a value in man coverage. So when you got a guy who can impact every phase of the game like that at linebacker, it's so valuable. And I think he's really the top guy in this linebacker class. At cornerback, Derek Stingley, man, he's incredibly impressive. It's almost like we've almost got him bored of hearing his name, because since he was a true freshman, he was locking down SEC wide receiver once, and that just says it all. He has multiple years of being extremely reliable on film, great size, great length, great technique, great fluidity to turn and run with a receiver, the deep speed to carry vertical routes. He has the whole package at cornerback. And for our final position, who's our safety one, Alex?
Before we go to our safety one, I want to mention something quick about Christian Harris and then Derek Stingley.
Yeah.
So Christian Harris, he's extremely impressive in coverage. He played safety in high school. He was recruited to Alabama, or he was recruited nationwide as a safety. He played in whatever national bowl game, the U.S. Army Bowl, I think, All-American Bowl. And he was pretty much switched on the spot by Alabama from safety to linebacker, and he was put in, and he ran with it ever since. He's without ever playing any defensive back, any safety. He started year one as a true freshman at linebacker. That pretty much says all you need to know. Starting at pretty much the best defensive school prospect-wise in the nation, as a true freshman at a brand new position. Like I said, that says it all. That says how special this guy is. And when you watch the tape, there are some things that, here and there, some things that he's got to clean up. That's because he's only been playing a linebacker for 2 years. So you can kind of let those things slide when you look at, his whole career, not just the current tape now, and knowing that he's only played 2 years his whole life at linebacker. And about Derek Stingley, really quickly before we get to our last position, Stingley is so good that I guarantee you this year he's barely going to be thrown at. So for those of you that say the ball production isn't there, it's because he's not being thrown at. He's just that good. And some people even said it about his last year's tape, that the ball production isn't there. It's because he's so good. It's putting the receiver on the island, completely taking him away. So it's, don't worry about the ball production. When the ball's thrown his way, he knows how to bat it down. He knows how to catch it. And moving to our safety position, Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame. He's, in my opinion, he's the only good safety near the top of the draft class. I don't think we've really scouted another one in depth just because of the broad range between safety 1 and safety 2.
Yeah, I think that's the consensus answer right now for the safety 1 in this class. Our next question is, who do we think are some of the small school players that we're excited for, and what round do we see them going in? I think that the way we're going to define small school here is just non-Power 5, and we'll leave out the American Athletic Conference too, since they've been really generating a lot of talent and some top teams like Cincinnati last year. So I think there are really 2 teams I would want to highlight. First of all, Nevada. Nevada has Carson Strong, as we know, but Romeo Doubs is his wide receiver 1, and we've been in love with him since we watched Strong last December. Doubs is really big, really tall, really fast. He can challenge vertically. He can have some success on shallower routes too. Really good hands. And he's just a really well-rounded receiver in a class where you're going to see a lot of these smaller, quick slot receiver types. So he's definitely going to be very interesting. And I think he could even go as high as the 2nd round is what I'm going to say right now. And Cole Turner is their tight end. We actually interviewed him a couple months ago, so make sure to go and check that out on our YouTube if you haven't yet. But he's just what's very interesting about him is he used to play basketball at a high level in high school, and you really see that on tape where he goes up, gets it regularly. He's a very athletic tight end and can be the next good move tight end in the NFL. And so you could say a little bit about those guys, but I know we also really like some guys over at Coastal Carolina. So go ahead and get into that team.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like you said pretty much all that needs to be said about the Nevada guys. The whole wide receiver corp over there in Nevada is extremely impressive. And we noticed that from watching Carson Strong, obviously, like you mentioned. So Malik Willis, obviously another guy. And then the 2 guys from Coastal Carolina that we really liked, DeJordan Strong, he's a cornerback. We also had an interview with him, and that was another great interview. Again, go watch it if you haven't on our YouTube channel. He shows off his Sunbelt ring, so that's pretty fun. And he really has all the skills that you need from a cornerback at the next level. He runs with guys really well. He's really fluid in his hips. And we talk about all that in our interview with him. So again, go check that out if you haven't. And then the quarterback, Grayson McCall, he's a really impressive prospect. You mentioned earlier, he is probably more likely to go in the 2023 draft. But he's really accurate. He moves really well. He's athletic. And again, we'll talk about him in our quarterback podcast, so I don't want to talk about him too much. But I think those are really our 6 guys from smaller schools that we like.
Yeah, and I'll just add in the second part of the question on how high they could go. I think McCall has true round 1 potential. Jordan Strong is a guy that I can see going day 2, maybe in the 3rd round. And another guy from Coastal Carolina I really like is Isaiah Likely. I think he has some day 2 potential as well. Our next question is, what do we think on Auburn running back Tank Bigsby? I think as he was a true freshman in 2020, got 800 or so yards, I think at a 6.0 yards per carry rate. So I think he was really impressive. Turning on the tape, he's very well-rounded as a runner, really good contact balance. really good athleticism. And I think that the worry I have with him in terms of the NFL projection a couple of years down the line is how much mileage are going to be on those wheels, so to say.
So I think Costa cut out for a second.
In the coming seasons, so he might have a lot of wear on him. But what do you think about him, Alex?
Pretty much, I think pretty much exactly what you said. The contact balance was one of the things that I really noticed. I think he moves pretty well. He jumps around, moves laterally really well. I think he has some good patience and vision. You see him behind the line of scrimmage. He'll pick out his holes pretty well, and if it's not there, he'll jump around until he finds one. And he's a tough runner too. I mean, you see him run through tackles, never stop churning his legs. He's an impressive guy. But I agree with what you said about, maybe too much tread on the tires. Knowing that he was a true freshman in 2020, he has at least 2021 and 2022 before he is able to declare for the draft. So we got a quick question from one of our viewers. It says, who is your favorite player in this year's crop? So I'll start off. I haven't really thought about this yet. It's kind of early to name our favorite player. But right now, out of the guys I've watched, overall talent-wise, I'd say Thibodeau is the best that I've watched. I think my favorite Costa, if you have a name come to mind right away, feel free to say it now.
I'm gonna go Treylon Burks.
I was just gonna say that.
I was
gonna say Treylon Burks.
I see so much AJ Brown in him, and I really like him. Yeah, I think my Wi-Fi had cut out there, so sorry about that. But are we moving on to our next question?
I was gonna say Christian Harris is a guy I really like as well. So Treylon Burks, Christian Harris, two of our favorite guys so far in the 2022 NFL draft. We have plenty more guys to watch and some later round guys that we might fall in love with as well.
Yep. And our second to last question it's really simple. Stefon Diggs or Davonte Adams? I'm going to go Adams. I think it's pretty easy to me. All respect to the season that Diggs had. Adams has been doing this for several years, and he's been playing at that level without a quality wide receiver too this whole time, whereas Diggs had a Cole Beasley running in the slot, commanding a lot of attention from receivers. I just from cornerbacks, I just think Davonte Adams is a cut above Stefon Diggs. I would even say Davonte Adams is the best wide receiver in the NFL.
I'm going to take Diggs.
Oh, wow.
I love Diggs might be, a little bit younger. That's something I like as well. I think that he's better after the catch. I think he's a better deep threat. I'll give Adams the jump ball, 50-50 ball contested catch. I just love Diggs' speed and what he can do after the catch and how slippery and how well he moves, weaving through defenders. But I think it's close, definitely. I think Diggs made it happen with guys like Kirk Cousins throwing the ball and
not at the level that Davonte Adams has been playing. Diggs really took a step up last year. He wasn't playing an absolute elite wide receiver. He wasn't even the wide receiver one on his team.
Well, I agree, but he made that jump when he went to a better quarterback.
That's true.
Adams has been playing with Rodgers, so I mean, I wasn't gonna discount Adams for playing with one of the best quarterbacks of all time, but I think playing with a very good quarterback benefited Adams as it also benefited Diggs, as we saw in 2020. I do think it's close, though. I think they're both two of the top, 3-4 wide receivers in the NFL.
Yeah. And our last question is, who are some of the free agents that the Seahawks could target? I was looking at their depth chart, and I think they're a little bit thin at cornerback. So I think that a Garyon Conley or a DJ Hayden, who are both still out there on the free agent market, could be of help to them.
I'm going to throw out a name that Seahawks fans will love to hear. How about KJ Wright? Lock him up. I mean, he's been with Seattle since 2012, I think. He's still a free agent. I know he early on in the free agency, he said he wanted to re-sign with them. I mean, let's make it happen, Seattle. Bring him back. And obviously, he was a linebacker there for a while. Maybe Richard Sherman.
I was going to say that one.
I know there's been some talk about him maybe wanting to go back to Seattle. So I mean, you never know. They need help at corner. Maybe they can fit him in the scheme to where he can play the best he possibly can at his age. And, maybe he can help some of the younger cornerbacks because in his prime, he was one of the best.
Yep. And so that wraps up our Q&A session today. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Fantastic questions all around. And we really love being able to take on all these different topics in one segment. So, and stay tuned for another one coming up in the next few weeks.
Yep. And like I said, stay tuned for another one. Stay tuned pretty soon for our quarterback ranking podcast. We'll be talking about top 10 2022 NFL draft quarterbacks. So that should be a fun one. And that will be posted pretty soon after this one. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back soon.